Well, looks ridiculous right now, but making a euro mount out of this buck that I shot with Chris. Him and I doubled up on bucks and wanted to tell a story about it. Some wild stuff happened. So on November the 18th, Chris and I went down to a river bottom into an area where we've hunted before. We shot a buck at last year, and I had observed a few bucks in there a week before, and I saw this one particular buck in there that had very dark chocolate antlers on him, and that caught my eye. Of all the bucks I've seen in there, he was the most outstanding of them. But I'd only seen him a couple times and didn't really have a whole lot of anticipation of seeing him again, given that it's mid-November and they do a lot of cruising. He could have easily moved onto an adjacent property and gotten shot. So me and Chris went down there, mostly just wanting to do some spot and stock stuff. We were wanting to get in there and get on this high mound that's in that draw in the ditch that connects the hillsides to the river. And you can see a lot of the river bottom from there. So we were moving into there, and on our way in, duck hunters down on the river started shooting like crazy. They were shooting right over our heads. There was a group of them set up maybe 100 yards away from us. And we immediately thought, there's no way we're going to see any deer. They're all going to be up in the hills, spooked from all that gunfire. But as we were walking in, we look over and there's a doe looking straight at us, 150 yards away. And right then we figure, okay, they're used to the duck hunters, or they feel safe enough in that brush or in that ditch to not worry too much about it. But we figured maybe more mature bucks or older bucks are gonna stay hidden away, so we didn't really get all that excited. We went down into the ditch to make our way up to the knob to observe things, and as soon as I crested up over the hill to that observation knob, there was a buck about 200 yards away walking our direction along the tree line. I look at him with the binoculars, and he's a legal buck. And that's what Chris was looking for down there, was a decent legal buck. He wasn't going to get picky about what he shot. So we watched him for a minute and got into position. I assumed he had moved off. I kind of lost sight of him behind some trees, and Chris says to me real quick, hey, he just jumped the fence. There's a little chain link fence that runs down the middle of this field that we're looking over, and he had jumped over it towards us, making him 100 yards away from us. And we get a good look at him, and Chris likes the way he looks. He's good enough for him, and perfect shot for us, perfect distance. He puts the bead on him and knocks him down there at about 120 yards and falls over in his tracks. No track job or anything. We walk up to him 10 minutes later and start getting to work, gutting him. Excited to get a buck down so quickly. We'd been there hunting for maybe 15, 20 minutes by that time. While we're sitting there gutting Chris's buck, we look up and there's a little doe that's popped up coming out of the same tree line where his buck had come from. And we figure there's probably a buck not too far behind her. So Chris continues gutting his buck, and I go get in position to kind of watch over this doe. Meanwhile, she's making her way straight towards us. I'm down in the grass, just kind of scurrying up to her, and she's a lot closer than I thought. She covered a lot more ground, a lot quicker than I expected her to. And I pop over the edge of the chain link, and she's right there, maybe 15 yards away from me, looking straight at me. So I pull out my grunt call and give her a couple of grunts. And immediately, as soon as I grunt at her, she relaxes and just starts going back to grazing. Puts her head down and starts milling around, which was awesome. Had a live decoy out there at that point. So she stood there, and Chris is still gutting his buck about 50 yards away, and she kind of catches wind of him or sees him moving around and picks her head back up, starts looking at him, and I motion to him that she's there. he kind of starts behaving like a deer as well. She walks all the way around the chain link to get downwind of us. And I keep grunting and pretending like I'm a deer. And Chris takes cover behind his buck that he shot, holds his head up, and starts making the buck move around like he's just bedded there. And it convinces the doe. She's straight downwind of us. I know that she can smell us, but the buck is also there emitting a ton of smell. I mean, he smelled so ruddy that he was just bombing the area. So she looked at us with a little suspicion, but went right back to grazing and kind of milling around and just stared at him, holding up his buck's head while he twiddled the ears around and made it look like it was just a bedded buck laying there. And she just mosey on away and never spooked, didn't do anything. So I went back after that. Pretty wild experience, never done that before, never used a dead animal as a decoy, but it worked. And I went back to helping Chris gut that buck, and we finish up and we're sitting there retelling the story and talking about how incredible it is that we were so close to that doe and that everything worked out so perfectly. When I look up and I see another buck running straight towards us. And all I could see was his ears and what looked like a couple small antlers poking off. I said, oh, here comes a small buck. Chris picks up his rifle and looks through his scope, and I pick up my binoculars and get a closer look also, and he's a lot bigger. What it is he had really dark antlers. It's the chocolate buck that I'd seen the week before, and his antlers had blended in with the trees behind him. I couldn't tell how big he was, and he comes running straight at us, grunting. And so we take cover behind his dead buck again. He holds up the head and starts looking around with it and twitching the ears, once again using it like a decoy, and here comes that chocolate buck. And he comes running up to 40 yards of us before he realizes that we're not a deer sitting there, and he kind of gets a little bit sketched out. But he's still grunting and just a little bit confused. I pick up my rifle, get on him, easy shot, 40 yards. He broadsides, presents a perfect shot. I can't pass it up, and I knock him down right there in his tracks as well. We stand up, we're high-fiving, and look behind us, and there's another doe behind us, just looking at us, confused. I mean, it's some of the craziest stuff I'd ever seen, but what we figure is that that buck saw us with the buck on the ground. He saw what looked like two deer hanging out with the doe behind us. The chocolate buck was likely the dominant buck of the area. And he saw another buck in there with the doe. It was coming in to fight. He probably heard us grunting and making buck noises. But yeah. So went over and looked at him. The body on this buck is just huge. Went up and got a hold of him, saw those dark chocolate antlers, and it's just a beautiful animal. Both of our bucks are just gorgeous. 2.5-year-old and I think a 3.5-year-old. And yeah, it was an awesome hunt. All in all, I think we had both bucks down within 35 to 40 minutes of being there. Just the fastest hunt and probably the wildest encounter I've ever had with deer, having them run towards us. I wish I could have got more of it on video this year when I've been doing those hunts with friends. I've been focusing more on just hunting and enjoying the experience more than I have been videoing. But I wanted to tell that story while it's fresh on my mind, and yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. It's given me some things to think about as far as strategy in the future for decoying or pretending like a deer, grunting and keeping deer calm, and yeah, different situations to maybe be a little bit more aggressive in various scenarios. But yeah, wanted to share that story. It's a pretty cool hunt. Hope you enjoyed listening. Thanks for watching.